Hyunwoo Kim adjusted his black suit as he walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. The building was enormous, made of crystal that sparkled with strange lights. Everything here was built for aliens, not humans. The ceiling stretched so high he could barely see it, and the walls curved in ways that hurt his eyes to look at. He had been Earth's ambassador to the galaxy for 3 years now. 3 long years of being ignored, laughed at, and treated like a child. The other species in the galaxy thought humans were weak and stupid. They called humans the soft ones, because they had emotions and cared about individual lives. Behind him walked Taehyun Park, his military advisor. Taehyun was a former soldier who had fought in Earth's wars before humans knew aliens existed. His job was to protect Hyunwoo, but mostly, he just watched and learned about alien weapons and tactics. Ji-woo Choi came with them too. She was a scientist who studied alien biology. She spent most of her time trying to figure out how the different species thought and communicated. It was not easy work. Some aliens talked through smell, others through lights, and some through sounds humans could not even hear. The 3 humans took their seats in the observation area. Their section was small and tucked away in a corner. The important species had big fancy areas near the center of the room. Humans got whatever space was left over. Today the council was discussing a serious problem. A group called the Veltar hegemony was attacking planets on the edge of the galaxy. They came from somewhere far away beyond the known star systems. Their ships were huge and black, and they destroyed everything in their path. The Veltar had already attacked 12 worlds in the past 6 months. They did not take prisoners or negotiate. They simply landed on planets, took everything useful, and left the worlds dead and empty. No one knew what they wanted or where they would attack next. The alien species in the council could not agree on what to do. The Althurians thought they should try to talk to the Veltar. The Althurians were very smart and believed every problem could be solved through intelligent conversation. They had big, wrinkled heads and spoke in a language that sounded like music. The Kron wanted to fight the Veltar in single combat. The Kron were warriors who looked like giant lizards covered in metal armor. They believed the strongest fighter should lead, and all conflicts should be settled through personal battles. They kept challenging the Veltar leaders to duels, but the Veltar never responded. The Zephyrians suggested economic pressure. They were traders who controlled much of the galaxy's commerce. They thought they could force the Veltar to stop by refusing to trade with them. The problem was that the Veltar did not seem to want anything the galaxy had to offer except empty planets. Other species had other ideas. Everyone argued, but no one could agree. They had been debating for weeks while the Veltar continued their attacks. Hyunwoo listened to the arguments with growing frustration. He had seen this before. Every time there was a crisis, the alien species spent months talking and never acted. They were all too proud to admit they might be wrong, and too scared to take risks. The Althurian Prime Speaker was talking now. He was the leader of the most respected species in the council. His bioluminescent crown glowed with complex patterns as he spoke about the need for more study and careful analysis. We must understand their motivations, the Prime Speaker said, in his musical voice. Every sentient species has logical reasons for their actions. We simply need to discover what the Veltar truly want. Several other aliens agreed with clicking sounds and flashing lights. They nodded their various heads and appendages in approval. Hyunwoo had heard enough. He stood up and raised his hand, requesting permission to speak. The chamber slowly grew quiet as aliens noticed the human trying to get attention. The Prime Speaker looked down at Hyunwoo with what might have been amusement. Humans rarely spoke in council sessions, and when they did, it was usually about minor trade disputes or requests for technical assistance. The representative from Earth may speak, the Prime Speaker announced. His tone suggested he expected this to be brief and unimportant. Hyunwoo walked down to the speaker's platform in the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. Hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and other sensing organs focused on him. He looked around at the assembled delegates. These beings represented civilizations that had existed for thousands of years before humans learned to use fire. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth could build. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days, while human vessels took months to travel between nearby star systems. But Hyunwoo had learned something about these advanced species during his 3 years as ambassador. For all their intelligence and technology, they had forgotten how to make hard choices. They had grown comfortable and safe. They solved problems through committees and discussions because they had not faced a real threat in centuries. Honored delegates, Hyunwoo began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I have listened to your debates about the Veltar threat. You speak of understanding their motivations and finding diplomatic solutions. These are noble goals. He paused, looking directly at the Althurian Prime Speaker. But what if you are wrong? What if the Veltar cannot be reasoned with? What if they do not want anything we can give them except our destruction? Some aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Kron war chief growled approvingly, but most of the other species looked annoyed at the humans' blunt questions. My species has only recently joined this galactic community, Hyunwoo continued. We are young and inexperienced compared to your great civilizations, but we have learned some hard lessons in our short history. Sometimes the only way to stop a destroyer is to destroy them first. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Many species had never heard a human speak so directly about violence. Humans were supposed to be the emotional, peaceful species that needed protection from the harsh realities of galactic politics. Hyunwoo waited for the noise to die down, then spoke his final words. I ask you to consider this. While you debate and analyze, the Veltar grow stronger. While you seek understanding, they destroy more worlds. How many more civilizations will die while we search for a perfect solution? He returned to his seat as the chamber buzzed with discussion. Tae-hyun and Ji-woo looked at him with surprise. Hyunwoo had always been diplomatic and careful in his speeches. This was the first time he had challenged the council so directly. The Althurian Prime Speaker called for order, but Hyunwoo could see that his words had affected some of the delegates. A few were looking at him with new interest, while others seemed angry at his suggestion that their approach might be wrong. As the debate resumed, Hyunwoo sat back and waited. He had planted a seed of doubt in their minds. Soon, he would have to do much more than that. 2 weeks passed after Hyunwoo's speech to the council. The aliens continued their endless debates while more reports came in about Veltar attacks. 3 more worlds had gone silent, their populations vanishing without a trace. Hyunwoo sat in his office at the human embassy, reading the latest intelligence reports. So-young Lee, Earth's top spy, had been working around the clock to gather information about the Veltar. What she had discovered was far worse than anyone imagined. The door chimed and Tae-hyun entered, followed by Ji-woo. Both looked tired and worried. The council is meeting again today, Tae-hyun said. Same arguments, same lack of action. The Kron are getting angrier, and the Althurians are calling for yet another research committee. Ji-woo pulled up a holographic display showing star charts. I've been analyzing the pattern of Veltar attacks. They're not random. There's a clear strategy behind their movements. She pointed to the affected systems. Look at this. They're not just taking resources. They're testing us. Each attack uses different methods, different approaches. It's like they're learning how we respond to various threats. Hyunwoo nodded grimly. So-young's latest report confirms your theory. We finally made contact with the Veltar, though not in the way anyone expected. He activated his secure communicator. So-young's face appeared on the screen. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. Tell them, Hyunwoo said simply. So-young took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I sent volunteers on a special mission. Dong-hyun Chen, Min-ho Wang, and Sul-ki Nam. They were all former military, all volunteers. They knew it was a one-way trip. Tae-hyun leaned forward. What kind of mission? We staged fake research accidents near Veltar territory. Made it look like our ships broke down and were captured. Each volunteer had quantum-encrypted neural implants that recorded everything until their brain stopped working. The room fell silent. Ji-woo covered her mouth with her hands. The intelligence they gathered before they died, So Young continued, shows us what the Veltar really are and what they really want. She transmitted the data to Hyunwoo's display. What appeared made everyone in the room step back in horror. Theo. Veltar were not just conquerors or resource gatherers. They were something far more terrifying. The beings were part machine, part biological organism. They had found a way to transfer consciousness from organic brains into their mechanical network. They're harvesting minds, So Young explained. Every sentient being they capture becomes part of their collective intelligence. They don't kill their prisoners. They absorb them. The knowledge, memories, and thinking patterns of every species they encounter gets added to their database. The recordings from the dead volunteers showed Veltar laboratories filled with beings from dozens of species, all connected to strange machines. The aliens were conscious but could not control their own bodies. Their minds were being slowly copied and integrated into the Veltar network. This explains their attack pattern, Jiwoo said with growing horror. They're not just studying our military responses. They're learning how each species thinks, how we make decisions, how we react to fear and stress. Hyunwoo studied the data with cold anger building in his chest. How long before they have enough information to predict everything we'll do? Based on their current rate of data collection, So Young calculated, they'll have detailed psychological profiles of all major galactic species within 18 months. After that, they'll be able to anticipate every possible response to their attacks. Taehyun understood the implications immediately. They're not trying to win a war through superior firepower. They're going to win by knowing exactly what we'll do before we do it. There's more, So Young said. The volunteers discovered something else before they died. The Veltar have a specific timeline. They plan to reach the core systems in 36 months. Nexus Prime, where the Council meets, is their final target. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and thought for a moment. When he opened them, his expression had changed. The diplomatic mask he usually wore was gone, replaced by something harder and more determined. Request an emergency council session, he told Taehyun. Full assembly, all species represented. What are you going to tell them? Jiwoo asked. The truth, all of it. The council chamber filled quickly when word spread about the human request for an emergency session. Most aliens assumed it would be another emotional plea for action. The humans were known for their dramatic speeches that accomplished nothing. Hyunwoo walked to the speaker's platform carrying a data crystal containing all the intelligence So Young had gathered. The cost in human lives to obtain this information was something the aliens would never truly understand. Honored delegates, he began. I come before you today not as a diplomat seeking consensus, but as a messenger bringing a warning. He inserted the data crystal into the chamber's main display system. Images from the Veltar laboratories appeared on screens throughout the room. The assembled aliens fell silent as they saw the horrific truth of what was happening to captured beings. A Zephyrian delegate made a sound of distress. Several Althurians' bioluminescent crowns flickered in patterns that indicated severe emotional disturbance. Even the Kron war chief, accustomed to violence, growled in anger at what he was seeing. 3 human volunteers gave their lives to bring us this information, Hyunwoo announced. They knew they would not return. They accepted death to learn the truth about our enemy. He let the images continue for several minutes. The silence in the chamber was complete, except for the occasional sound of distress from various species. The Veltar are not seeking territory or resources, Hyunwoo continued. They are harvesting consciousness itself. Every mind they capture makes them smarter, more capable of predicting our actions. They are studying us like laboratory specimens, learning our weaknesses while we debate proper procedures. The Althurian Prime speaker finally spoke. These images are disturbing, but surely there must be some way to communicate with them. Perhaps they can be convinced to stop if we offer them something they need. Hyunwoo's voice turned cold. What they need is us. Our thoughts, our memories, our ability to think and feel as individuals. They want to turn every conscious being in this galaxy into part of their collective network. He activated the next part of the data. Based on their current progress, the Veltar will reach the inner systems in 18 months. They will arrive at Nexus Prime in 3 years, By then they will know everything about how each of your species thinks and reacts. The chamber erupted in panicked discussions. Some species demanded immediate military action. Others insisted on forming study groups to verify the human intelligence. The Kron war chief began challenging other delegates to combat, while the Zephyrians proposed economic sanctions against anyone who might be trading with the Veltar. Hyunwoo watched the chaos with growing frustration. Even faced with evidence of their coming extinction, the aliens could not unite on a course of action. He raised his voice above the noise. You debate while they advance. You form committees while they harvest minds. You seek perfect solutions, while they prepare to turn every thinking being in this galaxy into part of their machine. The noise died down as his words penetrated the panic. I have one question for all of you, Hyunwoo said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. When the Veltar come for your worlds, your children, your very thoughts and memories, will you still be forming committees to study the problem? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of his footsteps as he left the platform and returned to his seat. The council chamber remained silent for long moments after Hyunwoo's question. Delegates from 47 species sat frozen, processing what they had seen and heard. The horrific images of Veltar Laboratory still glowed on their screens, showing the fate that awaited every thinking being in the galaxy. On Luna Station, orbiting Earth's moon, Junseo Kang watched the council session through a secure transmission. As Secretary of Galactic Affairs, he was responsible for coordinating Earth's response to the crisis. Beside him stood General Hyejin Yoon, commander of the United Earth Defense Force. He's about to do it, Junseo said quietly. General Yoon nodded. 3 years of preparation. I just hope the other species are ready to hear the truth. Back in the council chamber, Hyunwoo stood up again. The diplomatic mask he had worn for 3 years was completely gone now, replaced by something that made several alien delegates shift nervously in their seats. For 3 years, Hyunwoo began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I have stood in this chamber and listened to debates about proper procedures and non-interference policies. I have watched as you treated my species, like children playing at civilization. He activated his personal holographic display, showing star charts that made several species gasp in recognition. The maps displayed detailed information about military positions, fleet movements, and strategic resources throughout the galaxy. While you debated, we prepared. While you analyzed, we acted. While you sought consensus, we made choices. The display showed the true scope of human military activity. Battle fleets were positioned at key hyperspace jump points throughout the year. Outer systems. Hidden weapon platforms floated in asteroid fields and around uninhabited moons. Most shocking of all, the charts showed evidence of massive civilian evacuations from threatened worlds. The Althurian Prime Speaker's bioluminescent crown flickered in patterns of confusion and alarm. How did you obtain this information? These are classified military positions from multiple species. We asked for them, Hyunwoo replied simply, not through official diplomatic channels, but through the networks we've built over the past 3 years. While your governments debated, your military commanders talked to ours. They understand what's coming. Admiral Sang-min appeared as a hologram beside Hyunwoo. The scarred veteran's presence commanded immediate attention, even from the alien delegates. His left arm was missing, lost in Earth's border wars 20 years earlier, and his face carried the marks of someone who had seen too much combat. Honored beings, Admiral O said. 72 hours ago, the Veltar Advance Fleet reached the Kepler system. They encountered the 4th Human Fleet under Admiral Eugene Seo. A new display activated, showing the space battle that had taken place in the Kepler system. The alien delegates watched in stunned silence as human warships engaged Veltar vessels that dwarfed them in size. The Veltar ships were massive, each one the size of a small moon. Their black hulls absorbed light and energy, making them difficult to target with conventional weapons. They moved slowly but seemed almost impossible to damage. The human fleet was tiny in comparison. Their ships were fast but fragile, built for speed and maneuverability rather than heavy armor. By all logical calculations, the humans should have been destroyed within minutes. Instead, the aliens watched as human vessels coordinated attacks with surgical precision. They used the Veltar ship's massive size against them, targeting specific weak points that had been identified through the intelligence gathered by the dead volunteers. When conventional weapons failed to penetrate Veltar armor, human commanders made a choice that shocked every alien watching. Captain Wu Jin Moon of the destroyer Soulsfire deliberately rammed his ship into a Veltar command vessel. His final transmission echoed through the council chamber. Tell the galaxy, humans don't surrender, we don't retreat, we don't negotiate. With devourers of souls. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also created a chain reaction that disabled 2 other Veltar vessels. Similar ramming attacks throughout the battle resulted in the destruction of the entire Veltar advance fleet. The cost was enormous. 12 human ships were destroyed, taking their entire crews with them. Over 3,000 human lives were lost in the battle, but the Veltar advance had been stopped. The enemy expected to face civilized species who would respond according to predictable patterns, Hyunwoo said as the battle footage ended. They analyzed your military doctrines, your rules of engagement, your concepts of acceptable losses. They prepared for rational responses from rational beings. His voice grew harder. They did not expect to face a species that views the extinction of consciousness as the ultimate evil. They did not prepare for beings willing to die rather than allow their minds to be harvested. The chamber erupted in discussions. Some species were horrified by the human tactics, calling them barbaric and wasteful. Others, particularly the warrior Kron, showed grudging respect for the humans' willingness to sacrifice themselves for victory. The Zephyrian trade delegate spoke up. This is madness. Those crews died for nothing. The Veltar will send more ships, larger fleets. Your sacrifice will be meaningless. Hyunwoo turned to face the Zephyrian. Those crews died to buy time. Time for you to make a choice. Time for this council to decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. He looked around at all the assembled delegates. The Veltar main fleet will reach the inner systems in 72 hours. They know about the Kepler battle by now. They will adapt their tactics, bring more ships, prepare for human-style attacks. Admiral O stepped forward. Our intelligence indicates the main Veltar force consists of over 200 harvester ships and thousands of support vessels. They have enough firepower to sterilize every inhabited world in the core systems. Then we are doomed, said a Novan collective speaker. No force in the galaxy can stand against such numbers. Hyunwoo's expression changed, revealing something that chilled every alien in the chamber. It was not anger or fear, but cold, absolute determination. You are correct that no single species can stand against the Veltar, but we are not asking you to fight as individual species. He activated one final display, showing fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The assembled delegates saw something that had never existed before in galactic history. A coordinated defense network spanning dozens of star systems. Human vessels are already coordinating with Kron warships, Althurian science vessels, and Novan defense platforms. Military commanders from 23 species have agreed to unified command structure. Evacuation fleets from 15 species are moving civilian populations to secure areas. The Althurian Prime Speaker's crown blazed with shocked realization. You have been organizing this for months without council approval. This is a violation of every treaty and agreement that governs galactic relations. Yes, Hyunwoo replied without hesitation. We have violated every law, broken every treaty, and ignored every protocol that stood in the way of survival. He paused, letting his words sink in. The hour of war has arrived. Not a war for territory or resources, but a war for the right of thinking beings to exist. I stand before you not seeking your permission, but offering you a final choice. His voice rose to fill the vast chamber. Stand with us and fight for the preservation of consciousness itself, or step aside and watch as every mind in this galaxy is harvested and converted into the Veltar Collective. He looked directly at each delegation in turn. Choose quickly. The enemy will not wait for you to finish your committees and debates. They are coming, and they will not stop until every free thought in the universe is part of their machine. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of his footsteps as he left the speaker's platform. Behind him, 47 species faced the most important decision in galactic history. The council chamber remained frozen in silence for several heartbeats after Hyunwoo's ultimatum. 47 species faced a choice they had never expected to make: trust the violent, emotional humans, or face extinction alone. The first to speak was the Kron war chief, Graktor. His massive form rose from his seat, towering over the other delegates. His voice was like grinding stone as he addressed Hyunwoo directly. "Human who speaks truth, the Kron have watched your species for 3 years. We wondered what you truly fight for. Many Kron thought humans were weak because you care for individual lives." The war chief's scarred face showed what might have been approval. "Now we see the truth. You fight for the right to be. You choose death over slavery. This is honorable. The Kron will stand with you." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. The Kron had never allied with any other species in their recorded history. They believed in individual strength and personal combat, not cooperation. The Althurian Prime Speaker's bioluminescent crown flickered in complex patterns as his species communicated through light-based signals. Finally, he spoke in his musical voice. "The human approach lacks elegance and seems needlessly violent. However, their logic appears sound. Against absolute negation of consciousness, perhaps absolute commitment is the only rational response." More voices joined the discussion. The peaceful Zephyrians, who had never participated in military actions, announced they would provide medical support and evacuation assistance. Their trading networks could move civilian populations faster than any military transport. The technologically advanced Novan Collective offered to share their defensive technologies. Their shield generators and sensor arrays were the most sophisticated in the galaxy, but they lacked the tactical experience to use them effectively in combat. Even the mysterious Void Touched, who rarely spoke in council sessions, pledged their shadow fleets. These beings lived in the dark spaces between stars and commanded vessels that could appear and disappear like ghosts. As species after species committed to the defense, Captain Insu Jang observed from the human cruiser Soul's Pride. He was coordinating with Allied fleet commanders as the impossible began to happen. Dozens of different military doctrines were being merged into a single command structure. Commander Bo Young Shin of Human Strategic Command appeared on the ship's main screen, addressing the joint command meeting. "We don't need perfect coordination," she explained to the assembled fleet commanders. "We need commitment. Every species will fight according to their nature. We'll provide the tactical framework they can operate within." The logistics were staggering. Kron warships were built for close combat with heavy armor and short-range weapons. Althurian vessels were research platforms converted for war, carrying advanced sensors and long-range particle beams. Novan ships were defensive fortresses with powerful shields but limited mobility. Human commanders had spent months studying each species' military capabilities. They understood that trying to force everyone to fight the same way would be a disaster. Instead, they created battle plans that used each species' strengths while covering their weaknesses. Research Director Yoonji Lim from the Seoul Institute of Xenopsychology provided crucial intelligence about Veltar psychology and tactics. Her analysis of the captured data revealed important weaknesses in the enemy's approach. "The Veltar see consciousness as inefficient," she explained to the Joint Command Staff. "They view individual thought as wasteful redundancy. This gives us an advantage they cannot understand." She displayed psychological profiles of both humans and Veltar. They make decisions as a collective, which makes them predictable once you understand their logic patterns. But they cannot comprehend species that value individual choice and sacrifice. Admiral O nodded grimly. "They've analyzed our technologies and standard tactics, but they cannot predict what we'll do when we throw away the rule book and fight for something more important than survival." As the fleet preparations continued, Hyunwoo made one final address to the council. The chamber was nearly empty now. Most delegates had left to coordinate their species' war efforts. Only a few remained, still debating the wisdom of following human military leadership. The Veltar expect us to behave as we always have, Hyunwoo said to those who remained. They expect us to be divided by our differences, cautious about taking risks bound by our individual limitations and protocols. His voice carried absolute certainty. They understand our technologies because they've observed them. They know our standard tactics because they've studied our military histories. They can predict our normal responses because they've harvested the minds of our soldiers and leaders. He paused, looking at each remaining delegate. What they cannot understand is what happens when free-thinking beings choose to become something greater than the sum of their parts. The massive view screen activated, showing the assembled defense fleet. Human vessels flew alongside Kron dreadnoughts, their different designs creating a patchwork of technology and philosophy. Althurian science ships had been enhanced with Novan shield generators. Zephyrian medical frigates carried emergency supplies for dozens of different species. At the fleet's heart was the Terra Invicta, Admiral O's flagship. The massive battleship had been built specifically for this moment, incorporating technologies shared by a dozen species. It was not the most powerful ship in the galaxy, but it represented something that had never existed before. True cooperation between different forms of consciousness. The flagship broadcast on all frequencies in every known language. We are the free minds of this galaxy. We will not be harvested. We will not be converted. We will not surrender our right to think, to dream, to choose our own destiny. Captain Woo-seok Kim, commanding the human destroyer Busan's Thunder, coordinated with Kron Battlemaster Throken as their ships took position in the defense formation. Despite their completely different approaches to warfare, they had found ways to work together. Your ramming tactics are insane, Throkun growled over the communication link. But effective. Kron respect effectiveness. Your boarding attacks are brutal, Captain Kim replied. But when conventional weapons fail, sometimes brutal is what works. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Species that had barely tolerated each other for centuries were learning to fight as one force. The process was chaotic and sometimes dangerous, but it was working. Commander Yeon-suk Park, aboard the science vessel Soul's Mind, worked with Althurian researchers to analyze Veltar weaknesses. Their combined knowledge had revealed critical flaws in the enemy's collective decision-making process. They have trouble adapting when multiple unexpected things happen simultaneously, she reported to the fleet command. Their collective consciousness needs time to process and analyze new situations. Admiral O smiled grimly as he received the report. Then we'll make sure they have too many unexpected situations to handle at once. The final piece of the human strategy was the most controversial. Earth's colonies in the outer systems had been secretly evacuated over several months, but the planets themselves had been left behind. Hidden weapon systems and automated defenses had been installed on every world the Veltar might attack. When the enemy arrived expecting to harvest resources and populations, they would instead face a galaxy-wide trap. Every seemingly abandoned planet would become a weapon turned against them. As the combined fleet moved toward the outer defensive perimeter, Hyunwoo reflected on the 3 years he had spent as Earth's ambassador. He had come to the galaxy, hoping to find allies and trading partners for his young species. Instead, he had discovered that sometimes leadership meant making choices others were afraid to make. Sometimes diplomacy meant threatening war to prevent extinction. And sometimes the only way to save civilization was to show everyone what they were truly fighting for. The hour of war had indeed arrived, but humanity would not face it alone. The combined galactic fleet took position at the edge of the Kepler Nebula, where long-range sensors had detected the approaching Veltar armada. Admiral O stood on the bridge of the Terra Invicta, watching tactical displays that showed the largest military force in recorded history. 237 Veltar harvester ships emerged from hyperspace, each one a mobile factory designed to strip worlds of life and resources. Around them swarmed thousands of smaller vessels, fighters, scouts, and support craft that glittered like deadly insects in the starlight. The sight should have been terrifying. Instead, Admiral O felt a cold satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as the humans had planned. All fleet elements report status, he commanded. Responses came from across the battle formation. Kron Battlemaster Thraken confirmed his dreadnoughts were ready for close combat. Althurian Fleet Prime Velandra reported her science vessels had established sensor networks throughout the battle zone. Novan Collective Node 7 indicated their defensive platforms were online and ready. Over 40 species had contributed ships to the defense fleet. The formation stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space, representing every major military doctrine and technology in the galaxy. It should have been impossible to coordinate such diverse forces, but human tactical officers had spent months learning how each species fought. Captain Minseok Lee aboard the fast attack cruiser Incheon's Blade led the first wave of human ships. His mission was to probe Veltar defenses and identify their command structures. Behind him flew ships from 12 other species, all following attack patterns they had practiced for weeks. Remember, Lee broadcast to his mixed squadron, "We're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to confuse them long enough for the real plan to work." The Veltar responded exactly as human analysts had predicted. Their collective consciousness processed the incoming attack according to established patterns, deploying defensive formations that had worked against every previous enemy. But they had never faced an enemy like this one. Kron warriors launched boarding pods directly at Veltar command ships, ignoring defensive fire that would have stopped more cautious attackers. Althurian vessels used precision weapons to target specific systems while staying well outside normal combat range. Novan platforms created overlapping shield barriers that deflected Veltar energy weapons. Each species fought according to their nature, but all followed the same strategic plan. The Veltar Collective struggled to adapt as their opponents used dozens of different tactics simultaneously. Commander Jung Hwan Park coordinated the battle from his position aboard the tactical command ship Seoul Strategy. His screen showed the flow of combat across the entire engagement zone, and what he saw made him smile grimly. "Phase 1 complete," he reported to Admiral O. "The enemy is fully committed to the battle. All Veltar reserves are engaged." This had been the critical moment. The humans needed the Veltar to commit their entire force to destroying the galactic fleet. If even a few harvester ships had held back, the plan would fail. "Execute Phase 2, Admiral O ordered. Throughout the outer systems, automated systems that had been hidden for months suddenly activated. The abandoned colony worlds that the Veltar had expected to harvest easily revealed their true nature as massive weapons platforms. Plasma cannons emerged from beneath artificial landscapes. Missile batteries that had been disguised as mining. Equipment began launching coordinated strikes. Defense satellites that looked like space debris came online and began targeting Veltar support vessels. The enemy collective reacted with confusion and rage. Their careful plans had been based on harvesting resources from defenseless worlds. Instead, they found themselves trapped between an active battle fleet and heavily armed planetary defenses. Captain Yuna Kim, commanding the stealth destroyer Soul's Shadow, led the third phase of the attack. Her ship and 30 others had been hiding in the nebula's gas clouds waiting for this moment. "All stealth units, target the harvester ships directly," she ordered. "Ignore the escorts. We need to stop them from retreating and regrouping." The stealth attack caught the Veltar completely unprepared. Their collective consciousness had been focused on the main battle, leaving their rear formations vulnerable. Human stealth ships appeared throughout the enemy fleet, targeting the massive harvester vessels with concentrated fire. But it was the fourth phase that truly shocked the galaxy. Throughout the battle, human ships had been taking enormous casualties. Vessels rammed enemy craft when their weapons failed. Crews stayed at their posts even when their ships were venting atmosphere. Captains chose to detonate their reactors rather than allow their vessels to be captured. The Veltar had expected this behavior from humans. What they had not expected was for other species to adopt similar tactics. Kron Battlemaster Thraken deliberately crashed his flagship into a Veltar command vessel, roaring ancient war songs as his ship exploded. Althurian Fleet Prime Velandra ordered her damaged science vessel to ram a harvester ship, transmitting mathematical poetry about the beauty of sacrifice until her final moment. Even the peaceful Zephyrians chose destruction over capture. Captain Zenara of the medical frigate Healing Wind detonated her ship's medical supplies, creating a chemical explosion that destroyed 2 Veltar escorts and damaged a harvester. The collective consciousness of the Veltar began to break down, as they encountered behavior they could not process or predict. Their database contained detailed information about how each species normally fought, but they had no reference for beings choosing death over logical tactical retreat. Admiral O watched the tactical displays as the battle reached its climax. Veltar formations were collapsing as their command structure struggled to adapt to unprecedented tactics. But the cost was enormous. Over half the galactic fleet had been destroyed or heavily damaged. All remaining units, he broadcast. Execute Phase 5. Final assault on the Veltar core formation. The surviving ships of the galactic fleet formed up for one last coordinated attack. Human vessels led the charge, followed by Kron dreadnoughts and Althurian science ships. Novan platforms provided covering fire, while Zephyrian medical vessels rescued survivors from damaged ships. Commander Bo Young Shin, now commanding the defense coordination from Luna Station, watched as her carefully planned battle reached its conclusion. Every phase had worked exactly as designed, but the price had been higher than anyone had hoped. The final Veltar harvester ships were destroyed in a series of ramming attacks, led by Captain Dongwoo Kim of the battleship Gwangju's Fury. His last transmission echoed across the galaxy. Free minds never surrender. As the wreckage of both fleets drifted in space, Admiral O surveyed the battlefield. The Veltar threat had been eliminated, but 17 human worlds had been sacrificed as bait for the trap. Millions of beings from dozens of species had died in the fighting. 6 months later, Ambassador Hyunwoo stood before a very different galactic council. The chamber had been rebuilt after suffering damage in the final Veltar assault on Nexus Prime. Representatives from all 47 species were present. But the atmosphere was completely changed. The council no longer debated endlessly over minor issues. The shared experience of fighting together had created bonds that transcended species differences. Military cooperation agreements that would have taken decades to negotiate were signed within weeks. A new memorial wall dominated one side of the chamber, listing every being who had died defending consciousness itself. At its center, carved, in simple Korean characters and translated into every galactic language, was the phrase that had become the war's rallying cry, 자유로운 마음은 결코 굴복하지 않는다. Free minds never surrender. The Kron war chief approached Hyunwoo after the ceremony. Human ambassador, the Kron have learned much about your species. We thought individual sacrifice was weakness. We were wrong. Your people taught us that sometimes the individual must die so that individuality itself can survive. The Althurian prime speaker joined them, his bioluminescent crown glowing with patterns of respect. The human approach to the crisis was inelegant by our standards, but it was also effective. We have much to learn about the relationship between logic and sacrifice. As Hyunwoo looked around the rebuilt chamber, he reflected on what had changed. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the newest members of a community could teach the oldest ones about courage and determination. Humans had joined the galactic community as the soft ones, emotional, unpredictable, and seemingly weak. They had proven that those same qualities could become strengths when everything meaningful was at stake. The species that had once dismissed humanity now sent their finest officers to study at human military academies. The tactical doctrines developed during the Veltar War became standard throughout the galaxy. Most importantly, the concept of sacrifice for principles rather than mere survival became part of galactic military philosophy. In his final address to the council, Hyunwoo spoke words that would be remembered for centuries. The galaxy asked what made humans different. In our darkest hour, we showed you, we don't just fight for survival, we fight for the right of others to be free. Sometimes, that makes all the difference between extinction and forever.